Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin the mask we learned to wear. Have you ever said yes while everything inside you was screaming no? Have you ever forced a smile to keep the peace even when your soul was crumbling? These may seem like small acts of compromise, polite gestures that grease the wheels of social life. But over time, they leave behind a strange fatigue or weariness that you cannot quite explain. It is not the tiredness of a long day's work or the exhaustion of sleepless nights. This is a quieter kind of suffering, a persistent ache without visible scars. It begins slowly, almost unnoticed. You start by adjusting your tone, softening your words, or swallowing an opinion that might cause discomfort. You laugh when something is not funny. You nod when you disagree. You suppress your frustration for fear of being labeled difficult. At first, these choices feel harmless even wise. After all, who wants conflict? Who doesn't want to be seen as kind, reliable, agreeable? And for a while, the strategy works. People do like you. They find you pleasant, trustworthy, predictable. You begin to carry the satisfaction of being accepted, of being the good one. But beneath the polished surface, something begins to stir. A faint unease grows like a shadow under the skin. This unease is the voice of the self being silenced here. Real desires, your inconvenient emotions. Your authentic impulses that don't fit into the carefully constructed mask you wear. The more you rely on this mask, the more you begin to feel the dissonance. You sense that you are betraying yourself not in dramatic betrayals, but in small, daily concessions. Each "I'm fine" when you are not. Each forced smile, each swallowed truth is a cut, and these cuts accumulate. Carl Jung called this mask the persona. He described it as a necessary construct, the role we play to navigate social life. Without it, we could not function in society. It allows us to work, to form groups, to belong. But the danger arises when we confuse the persona for our actual self. When the mask ceases to be a tool and becomes an identity. At that point, the performance takes over, and the actor forgets there is a person behind the role. Think of how many times you have played the part of the calm one, even when anger boiled inside you, or the helpful one, even when you had nothing left to give, or the cheerful one, even when sadness pressed heavily on your chest. Slowly, you stop knowing what you truly feel, because the persona has become second nature. It blends so seamlessly with your image that you begin to believe you are the role, and yet, deep down, something resists. You may not be able to name it, but you feel it. It comes as restlessness, as emptiness, as the unsettling sense that life feels rehearsed, as though you are walking through a script someone else has written. The world applauds the role you play, but inside, the applause sounds hollow. Living entirely through the persona is like being an actor trapped on a stage, where The play never ends. The curtain never falls, the costume never comes off, and the role consumes the actor. Outwardly, everything seems perfect. You are praised, trusted, admired, but inwardly, something suffocates. The mask hardens until it is no longer removable. And when that happens, you begin to live not as yourself, but as a shadow of who you once were. The question is, how long can this continue before something breaks? How long before the inner self, starved of air, begins to rebel? This chapter is not about rejecting the mask entirely. It is about recognizing it, naming it, and remembering that it is not you. Was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a bridge. And reclaiming the self begins with daring to look behind it. The war within, on the surface, everything seems fine. You wake up, go to work, smile at colleagues, attend gatherings, carry yourself as someone stable, dependable, even admired. People describe you as balanced, composed, someone they can rely on. They trust you with their problems. They lean on you for support, and in their eyes, you never falter. But inside, a silent rebellion is taking place. This rebellion is not loud or obvious. It doesn't announce itself with sudden breakdowns or public outbursts. Instead, it creeps in quietly through unexplained anxiety, disproportionate irritation, constant fatigue, or a sadness that clings even when everything in your life looks right. These are not random moods. They are signals of a deeper conflict. Jung described this conflict as the tension between the ego and the unconscious. The ego is the conscious part of the psyche that craves adaptation, recognition, and stability. It is the part of you that wants to preserve your image, to be liked, to maintain belonging. The ego is protective. It wants to keep things under control so you don't risk rejection. It insists that the mask, the persona, must stay intact. But the unconscious does not play by the same rules. It does not care about appearances, politeness, or social harmony. It is wild, symbolic, unfiltered. Its only demand is truth. When the ego bends too far toward pleasing others, the unconscious pushes back, trying to restore balance. And it does so not with polite reminders, but with symptoms, strange emotions, and physical unease. You may feel anxious without knowing why. You may find yourself snapping over small things that normally wouldn't bother you. You might sleep a full night yet wake up tired, or sit among friends and feel a strange loneliness. These experiences are not meaningless. They are the unconscious insisting you are drifting too far from your real self. The longer you ignore these signals, the louder they become. Jung explained this as psychic compensation. Imagine an inner scale. When one side, the ego, leans heavily into control, compliance, and performance, the unconscious tips the other side by unleashing the shadow, repressed anger, unspoken desires, neglected truths. The shadow does not disappear when you suppress it. It leaks out in your tone, in your habits. in the way you sabotage relationships or choices without knowing why. You might overwork, telling yourself you're being responsible, while secretly drowning in exhaustion. You might force cheerfulness while feeling an invisible weight pressing down. You might keep saying yes to others, but then carry a deep resentment that has nowhere to go. All of this points to one reality. You are living in a war zone that no one else can see. And this war is cruel because from the outside, everything appears fine. People look at you and say, "You're doing great." They don't see the cracks. They see the role you play so well. And perhaps you even believe them for a while. But then you lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, sensing that something essential is missing. You don't know exactly what it is, you only know that you cannot keep pretending forever. This is the invisible corrosion of the soul. Each time you betray yourself to be accepted, you wound your own integrity. The pain of this betrayal accumulates slowly until it becomes unbearable. And when it does, the unconscious rebels with full force. Panic, depression, or burnout may surface not as enemies, but as alarms sounding from within. The truth is simple, yet difficult to face. The persona was never meant to run your life. When it does, you live as a ghost of yourself. This is the war within the ego, clinging to safety, the unconscious demanding truth. The choice before you is stark. Keep playing the role and wither inside. Or begin listening to the rebellion rising from your depths. The trap of pleasing others. Some people are more vulnerable than others to the cycle of self-betrayal. Carl Jung noticed this pattern most strongly in what he called the extraverted feeling type. For this type of person, connection with others isn't simply a preference, it feels like survival. Their sense of self is built around being in harmony with the environment, sensing what others want, and adjusting themselves accordingly. Tame their room and immediately attune to the moods and expectations around them. Without even thinking, they adapt. At first glance, this seems like empathy, kindness, or diplomacy. And indeed, these qualities can be beautiful when they come from a place of authenticity. But for the extraverted feeling type, this adaptation often goes too far. Instead of asking, "What do I want?" the guiding question becomes, "What do they expect from me?" Identity, security, and even self-worth are tied not to inner truth but to the reflection found in other people's eyes. This is fertile ground for self-betrayal. Such individuals may stay in relationships that suffocate them, defend beliefs they don't actually hold, or tolerate situations that eat away at their health, all because keeping harmony feels safer than standing in their own truth. They confuse being loved with being useful. And when they are not playing the role of the agreeable, helpful one, they fear they have no value. But here's the critical point. This tendency does not belong only to a specific psychological type. It lives, in some degree, within all of us. Whenever you silence your opinion to avoid conflict, whenever you say yes just to escape displeasing someone, whenever you downplay your needs because you don't want to seem selfish, you are caught in the same psychic logic that acceptance is worth more than authenticity. The tragedy is that no matter how hard you try, you cannot please everyone. People's expectations are endless and often contradictory. For every approval you gain, there will be a criticism that stings. For every hand that applauds, there will be another that points in disapproval. And when your identity rests on pleasing, each rejection feels like annihilation. The unconscious does not remain silent in the face of this. It begins to push back, to send signals that you are drifting further and further from your center. Sometimes these signals appear as restless dreams, being chased, being naked in public, or being trapped in a space with no escape. Sometimes they appear as compulsions, working too much, eating too much, scrolling endlessly, all to avoid silence. And sometimes they show up in the body itself, anxiety, exhaustion, illness without clear cause. What makes this dynamic dangerous is that it often goes unnoticed. People who live for others become so accustomed to shaping themselves to external demands that they don't even realize they are betraying themselves. They are on autopilot, addicted to the feeling of being needed, to the comfort of external approval. And little by little, the authentic self withers in the background. Think about it. How many times have you regretted saying yes? How many times have you silenced your true feelings because you feared rejection? How many times have you smiled while your soul was quietly screaming? Each of these moments may feel small, but together they form a pattern that locks you in the prison of the persona. This is the trap of pleasing others. You gain acceptance, but you lose yourself. You are applauded, but you are empty. Grievous irony is that the very approval you crave cannot fill the void it creates. Only authenticity can. The voice of the unconscious. The unconscious does not communicate in polished sentences or rational arguments. Its whispers are sometimes shouts through symbols, sensations, and impulses. When you drift too far from your inner truth, it begins to send signals. The problem is that most of us have not been taught how to listen. These signals often arrive in dreams. You dream that you are naked in public, exposed and vulnerable. Or you dream of being chased, running endlessly without knowing why. Perhaps you dream of trying to speak, but no sound comes out, or of being trapped in a room with no exit. At first, these dreams may seem like nonsense. Jung taught us that they are not meaningless. They are coded messages. Nakedness represents the forced exposure of your essence. The chase reflects the relentless pressure of the persona. Silence speaks of your muted will. Imprisonment mirrors the suffocation of a soul confined to a life it does not recognize as its own. And when you do not listen to dreams, the body speaks next. Symptoms appear: fatigue with no explanation, panic attacks, chest tightness, headaches, chronic insomnia. Doctors may not find a clear cause because the root is not physical. The body is an extension of the psyche, and when the psyche is ignored, the body becomes the messenger. It is the last resort, a way of forcing you to pay attention. The unconscious also speaks through compulsions. You may claim that everything is fine, but you binge on food, scroll endlessly on social media, or bury yourself in work. These are not random habits. They are distractions. They are ways to avoid silence, because silence is dangerous. Silence makes space for the soul to speak, and often what the soul has to say is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront the truth that much of the life you have built may not reflect who you are. Facing these truths is painful. It hurts to admit that choices you thought were yours were shaped by fear of rejection, fear of disappointing, fear of not being loved. It hurts to realize that the career you pursued, the relationships you maintained, or the habits you formed were more about survival than authenticity. But ignoring these truths does not erase them. In fact, the longer you ignore them, the louder they grow. Jung explained that the unconscious has a compensatory function. When the ego leans too far in one direction, the unconscious pulls in the opposite. If you spend your life pleasing others, denying anger, and avoiding conflict, the unconscious will respond with shadow, aggressive impulses, emotional crises, or explosive dreams that break through the surface. As frightening as this may seem, it carries a hidden gift. These eruptions are not punishments, they are rescue attempts. They are the psyche's way of breaking illusions and forcing you back toward balance. There is something profoundly healing in this collapse. The mask may shatter, but in the pieces lies the possibility of reconstruction, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. This is why Jung insisted that dreams, symbols, and symptoms are not enemies. They are invitations. The unconscious is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to restore you. But here is the challenge. Listening requires courage. It requires turning toward the very discomfort you've spent years avoiding. It requires admitting that beneath the polished image and social success lies a truth you've silenced for too long. The unconscious will not rest until it is heard. And if you learn to listen, those whispers can become your compass back to yourself. The path back to yourself. There comes a moment when the effort to maintain the mask becomes unbearable. You smile, you nod, you keep fulfilling expectations. But the emptiness no longer hides quietly in the background, it moves into the center of your life. Fatigue is not just physical anymore. It becomes existential. The void is not occasional, it is constant. And the sense that you are living a life that is not yours becomes impossible to ignore. This breaking point, though painful, is also the beginning of something new. Jung called this process individuation. It is not a luxury reserved for the spiritually curious. It is a necessity for the soul. Individuation is the movement toward wholeness, the integration of every part of yourself, even the pieces you once denied, repressed, or buried under social convenience. It is not about abandoning the persona entirely. The mask will always serve a function. Rather, it is about breaking the illusion that the mask is all you are. It is about remembering that behind the performance exists a living, breathing, desiring self. But individuation is not easy. It requires confrontation. You must pull up the rug of consciousness and look at what you have swept underneath for years: the swallowed anger, the ignored desires, the fears dressed up as responsibility. You must face the shadow, all the traits you rejected in yourself, all the impulses you condemned, all the contradictions you pretended not to have. This is the hardest part, because it dismantles the comfortable image you have spent so long maintaining, and yet in that dismantling lies liberation. To individuate is to risk disappointing others, to risk losing approval, to risk stepping out of the role you have played so well. It may cost you comfort, stability, even relationships. But what you gain is immeasurable: the return of your own voice, your own will, your own soul. You begin to live not for applause or acceptance, but from a place of inner coherence. This path is not about perfection, it is about wholeness. To be whole is to recognize that you are both light and shadow, strong and fragile, kind and angry. To deny any part of this is to fracture yourself. To accept it is to live in truth. And truth, even when inconvenient, has a power that no external approval can replace. You may fear that living authentically will cost you everything. And in a way, it will. You may lose roles, statuses, and relationships that depended on your mask. But what you gain is infinitely greater: the peace of knowing that you are no longer betraying yourself. A peace does not come from others' approval. It comes from alignment between what you feel, what you think, and what you live. When you can finally stand before the mirror without masks and say, "I am here and I am enough," you reclaim your freedom. This is the silent revolution of individuation. Dang, it does not happen in a single dramatic act. It begins in small decisions, in courageous moments of honesty, in the willingness to stop performing and start existing. The persona will always be there, ready when you need it. But it will no longer define you. Instead, it will serve its rightful place, useful mask for certain situations, but never again a prison. Self behind the mask, once silenced, now breathes freely. And from that breath emerges a new kind of life, one not lived for others, but lived from the center of your own truth. This is the path back to yourself. Difficult, inconvenient, transformative, and the only real path to freedom.